In other business news now, the latest Household Resilience Index by Altron Fintech has confirmed continued pressure on South Africans, mainly due to the rising cost of living, including the high repo rate. The biggest concern has been noted in the year-on-year decline of more than 11% in the ratio of household income to debt costs. It's understood that households are sacrificing 6.7% of their disposable incomes to pay debt costs. Economist Dr Roelof Botha, who compiles the index on behalf of Altron Fintech, speaks to us now. Thank you so much for your time as always, Dr. Botha. What picture is this painting this time around? Is it a deterioration, especially that concern with regards to debt?
Yes, at face value, the 1.4% increase in improvement in the index on a year-on-year basis is encouraging. It is marginally better than the 1.2% year-on-year increase in the real growth rate of the GDP. But there are still a lot of worrying signs. The most important one, we'll just touch on it, and that's the amount of money that households on average are spending on servicing debt. Now, the 6.7% you referred to, that was in the fourth quarter of 2021 when the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank started with its I'm tempted to use the word nonsense, because we never had demand inflation. It was never necessary to raise interest rates to the levels they did. But they did it. It's out of my control. And now, a little bit more than 2 years later, households are paying 9%, not 6.7, 9% of their disposable income on average on servicing debt. There are, of course, many households, depending on which income group you are in, where that 9% is much higher. And it's sort of more or less unnecessary because we never had demand inflation. So that is a worrying sign, but at least there are some positive signs as well in the index.
The positives are always welcome, Dr. Botha, but also on the side of concern is how much of this trend is likely to continue, given that interest rates and the cost of living in South Africa is unlikely to go down anytime soon. Petrol has gone up, electricity tariffs, and that elevated interest rate at 8.25% means that the lending rate is unaffordable for many. Hence, we dive into that debt spiral.
Yes, absolutely. If you take the average home loan administered by Better Bond, the company Better Bond, since the Reserve Bank started raising rates until now, homeowners are paying on those bonds 4,000 Rand a month more than they used to every month. That is money that could have been spent on a variety of goods and services, that could have created more demand in the economy, could have created jobs in the economy. It's not happening. So this is really tight. But I must say that Johan Gellertly, the MD of Altron Fintech, he's also as concerned as I am, but he says that the reality is that consumers will continue to make ends meet, even if they take a second job, a third job, a night job, whatever, work longer hours and tighten up on their budgets. But it is so unnecessary, because what a lot of viewers probably haven't heard of is that the reason why we had high inflation 2.5 years ago in the first place was because of a 700% increase in the global freight shipping charges and an increase of more than 200% in the oil price in a short period of time, inter alia, thanks to the antics of that murderous head of state of Russia with his military invasion of Ukraine. And unfortunately now those freight shipping charges have come down again, and the oil price has come down from the Brent crude from 110 down to was as low as 80. It's jumped up a little bit, but still, our inflation rate is dropping like a stone. But the Reserve Bank is not lowering interest rates. What are they waiting for?
The global economy, of course, affected by the geopolitics that you touch on. I'd like us to also discuss the feasibility of avenues that exist that could be used as tools to cushion against the multiple pressures that we are seeing in this particular reading. As you've rightfully indicated, what the Reserve Bank has access to in terms of measures that could be put in place, as well as National Treasury. Just the likes of a fuel levy is one that has already been tempered with, example of what could be done to cushion consumers. However, we are back to normal settings post the COVID period.
Yes, the Reserve Bank is rather constrained. Its mission statement has two objectives. The one is to try to keep inflation low. That's the only one that they actually understand, apparently, because the other one is that they should not, in so many words, they mustn't apply monetary policy so strictly that you do not have growth and employment creation. And the fact of the matter is that real salaries in our economy continue to decline. We've seen, and you've reported on that, the disappointing figures on wholesale, the disappointing figures yesterday on retail, etc. What they can do, of course, is lower interest rates. Because the minute you lower interest rates, you lower the cost of capital. You incentivize businesses. What many people don't understand is that if your interest rates are higher than they should be, and that is the case in South Africa, it acts as a tax on venture capital. Right now, you can put your money in the bank, you can get between 9 and 10% if you have enough money on a fixed deposit. So why bother to start a new business and to create jobs? The Reserve Bank's monetary policy is wrong. It's wrong for this country. This is not America. This is not America. We cannot pinpoint our inflation rate at the midpoint in the target range, 4.5%, which is apparently what they're trying to do. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The inflation rate is in the target range. All this economy needs right now is lower interest rates and for the government to continue looking for the assistance of the private sector, as they're doing Richards Bay Coal Terminal, as they're doing now with Durban Harbour to a large extent, and fixing the roads as well. If you bring the private sector in to assist dysfunctional municipalities by taking hands and helping to recruit people with better skills, train those that can actually assist in those basic services, fix some roads, we can create literally millions of jobs. We've created almost 1 million jobs last year, despite the fact that we have the highest real interest rate in the world. This frustrates me no end.
Having said that, Dr. Botha, and I'm sure many South Africans are just as frustrated with the rising cost of living and that elevated repo rate, would you then suggest that there is politics at play with regards to monetary policy, because there has been no change? It literally has been doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome for years. South Africa has not changed its monetary policy, and that is what the Reserve Bank sticks to in terms of the mandate that they guided by. Talks, especially in an election year, about independence of the South African Reserve Bank also come to play, and questions have been asked about whether South Africa could widen the scope of monetary policy. What are your views there?
Well, I hate to disagree with you. You're usually right on the money, but the Reserve Bank's monetary policy is in fact inconsistent. It is glaringly inconsistent. I want to take you back just very quickly to the previous governor. It's not that long ago, Jill Marcus. She was a colleague of mine at Gibbs. A brilliant woman, the best governor we ever had as far as I'm concerned. She realized, and she understood economics, and she realized that South Africa requires a real prime rate. That is the prime rate, which is today 11.75. I think we all know that if we have debt. Minus the CPI, which is currently 5.3. That gives you 6.5%. That's the real prime rate. When Jill Marcus was governor, the real prime rate during her 5-year tenure was 3%. And we had 3% growth on average, almost 3% growth. Then she retired. And within 2 years, the new MPC took that average up to 5.5%. Just before COVID, there was another shift. In the beginning of 2020, the Reserve Bank finally realized, apparently the Monetary Policy Committee, the Reserve Bank itself is a fantastic institution, but not the Monetary Policy Committee, as far as I'm concerned. And then they had a mind shift, and they realized, well, South Africa's economy is not growing the way it should. We need to create jobs. And they actually lowered the real prime rate to 4.6%, more or less. We had a prime rate just before COVID of 10%, and the Reserve Bank thought this was okay. Now we have the same inflation rate, just above 5%, but we have an 11.75% prime rate, which is linked, of course, 3.5% less gives you the repo. So what has happened now, despite the fact that the economy is still suffering from COVID, despite the fact that we are not growing this economy, they have moved that up again to 6.5%. They have increased the real cost of capital by more than 100% since Jill Marcus retired. That was a bad day in our economic history.
Briefly, as a parting shot, if we carry on this trend as you are warning, where monetary policy is concerned, what is the likely detriment to the country?
If we continue like this, we'll have low growth with a bit of luck 1% this year. If the resource stocks, if the resource prices, iron ore especially, gold, platinum start recovering, we may even have 1.5% growth. But if we can lower interest rates back to where they were just before COVID, the inflation rate is under control. It's comfortably in the target range. Then we could have growth of easily 2.5%, 3%, easily. The property market will start booming. People will have, literally every homeowner with a bond in South Africa will have more money to spend in the economy. We do not have demand inflation. And I really think it's time that the Monetary Policy Committee wakes up.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Interesting views there from Economist Dr Roelof Botha talking to us about monetary policy. But the bigger discussion that we started off with is an index from Altron Fintech indicating that household expenditure continues to shrink amid the rising cost of living in the country. Of course, one of the reasons being the elevated interest rate.